So I already knew before today that Mercury goes into Aries today, and then around 11 a.m. I was kind of thinking like I wanted to do the next astrological forecast, but I could just already feel. I just knew that Mercury wasn't in Aries yet. I could just tell it was in Pisces, just because of how the way I'm feeling. Because like I said, I'm very Mercury ruled. So I looked at this chart, looked at to see when does Mercury actually ingress into Aries, and it turns out where I am, it won't be till like 11:30 at night, so almost midnight. So I'm gonna wait till then to post the next astrological forecast, and in a way, I'm almost like counting down like it's New Year's or something. And I guess for me, it almost is kind of like a New Year's because Mercury, is about to start a new cycle. See, like right around midnight, then Mercury will go into Aries. I can't even get to the exact moment because it's just between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m. This is how I am with Mercury and Pisces. I'm a little groggy. And, today's kind of just empty for me. I have the next 3 days off and just no plans really. But that just seems so fitting for a planet crossing the Pisces Aries line because usually there's almost like a destruction and there's almost like a brief void in between two larger periods sometime or two larger eras, if that makes sense. Like I think we can kind of experience that like after Christmas and before New Year's. It's almost like there's this weird void where it's like still technically that same year, but it's like everyone's already looking forward to the new year, so you're just kind of like in between. It's just a kind of like an eerie empty feeling, if you know what I mean. And that's actually common with between two larger cycles or between two eras. And so I guess that's what I'm doing. But I also wanted to show you my chart and explain like why do I call myself Manic Mercurian? Why do I talk about Mercury so much in relation to myself? Just gonna go through that today kind of and just show my chart. So yeah, let's just do that. So like most people, I started out with Placidus using Placidus house system. But because I was born very far north, in Placidus, my houses are very wonky, and some astrologers won't use Placidus. Even if they normally use Placidus, they might not for my chart, just because they say the houses are too distorted, which doesn't make sense to me. I think if you use Placidus or any housing system, you should stick by it no matter what. Like, yes, it does make my chart really weird, but I don't know. I guess that was one of the reasons why I was drawn toward using a different house system. Not necessarily because my houses were wonky, although I would prefer not to have a humongous 6th and 12th house because those are probably the hardest. So I mean, I guess that's maybe a sort of subjective reason, but the main thing is like I don't understand why people would just abandon their house system just because someone's born at a certain latitude. And I don't know if you know about house systems, so this might sound like gibberish, but what I'm talking about is it's kind of subtle. But you can see the 6th house starts at around halfway through Virgo and ends halfway through Sagittarius. So it covers, almost an equal quarter of my chart, which is massive. Like, usually the houses are like 12 roughly equal sections, so they'll each cover a 12th of your chart. I have two houses, the 6th and the 12th, which cover a quarter each of the chart. So half of my chart is just in the 6th or 12th houses. So I don't know. So that's just kind of weird, I guess. But like I said, it sucks because if I were to view transits that way, like especially with outer planets, like if I was going off of Placidus, then Uranus would have been in my 12th house for like 40 years or something. I mean, that's pretty intense. So yeah, I mean, so it's wonky here, but I guess my point is to show you why I'm so Mercury ruled. But as you can see, like my sun, moon, and rising are all ruled by Mercury, and also my ascendant is Gemini, so that makes my chart ruler Mercury, and Mercury is in Virgo. So all three of my sun, moon, and rising are all ruled by Mercury, and my chart ruler is ruled by Mercury, and it is Mercury. My chart ruler is Mercury, and it's in its own sign, so it's exalted and in domicile in Virgo. So Virgo is generally like the strongest sign for Mercury. And then plus, in the Placidus chart, I don't know if Mercury really rules the 6th house. I think that's technically incorrect, but in modern astrology, we do sort of draw connections between Virgo and 6th house, and therefore between Mercury and 6th house. So if Mercury Again, I don't know how many people know about house systems, so I'll try not to drone on too much about it because it might just sound like gibberish. But any of you too, like if you have such a strong planetary influence in your chart. Like most people do have one or two dominant planets. You might, well, you definitely will actually experience that planet's ingressions very strongly or very literally. I didn't phrase that super well, but like my very good friend has most of his planets like in Sagittarius, then he's Cancer rising, and then that would make the chart ruler the moon, and the moon is in Sagittarius, and so there's a huge lunar and Jupiterian influence in his chart, and so he does very much experience like lunar phases very strongly, and also Jupiter transits very strongly, and so it'll be different for each person because like for me, what I'm used to for myself is Mercury, so it's like a roughly like monthly basis on changing signs, and it does make a lot of aspects, so there is a lot going on with it, a lot of change always happening. Like Mercury aspects other planets way more than any other planet, so that's kind of the pace that I'm used to, but depending on what your ruling planet is, the pace will be dramatically different. So like my friend that I was talking about, the moon and Jupiter, the moon is very quick, it's the quickest by far of any planet, and that's so that's very much like a by week or even by day. It'll change signs every like 2.5 days. It'll have a new oh. So just depending on your own chart, you will experience similar patterns as well, but they might be dramatically different. Like if you're super Aquarius dominant, the patterns that I'm talking about would be kind of unfolding over your whole life. They would be like multiple year-long transits, because Aquarius is ruled traditionally by Saturn and in modern astrology by Uranus, and both of those are very slow. So maybe if you're very Aquarius ruled, you'll have like an extra important Saturn return, or stuff like that, or you'll just experience those 2.5 year long phases of Saturn in each sign. You might experience those extra potently or extra significantly, if that makes sense. But as for me, since this video is supposed to be all about me, again, I don't know if any of that's interesting, but as for me, yeah, I just experienced the Mercury ingresses very literally, and Mercury changes its speed very dramatically, so probably more so than any other planet. So I was fortunate that it was only in detriment and fall in Pisces for the last, I think it was 15 days, something like that, a little bit over 2 weeks. And so now Mercury's about to go into Aries, so that will conclude, a whole cycle around the zodiac. And for me, there is a renewal there. Like in the house system, Jupiter's enjoying the first house. And I think that sort of does correlate a little bit to Aries, like, the correlation between the first house and Aries. And so I do think Mercury is almost like in joy in Aries, even though I know that's not technically correct. But like I said, I experienced Mercury ingresses and transits very literally. And I just know, like, I usually have such a good time with Mercury in Aries, and especially compared to Pisces. While Mercury's in Pisces, I usually get sick. I didn't this year, so I'm very grateful for that. But I just get sick. I'm just not mentally or emotionally as like strong. And then also, I'm very much a solar oriented person. I've always felt a connection to the sun, and I've noticed that Mercury ruled people will usually be kind of more tan or have kind of hazel or brown eyes. They usually have darker hair. In the astrology groups on Facebook that we posted selfies, or I didn't really do that, but other people will do that, and that was a very clear pattern with Mercury ruled people, that they usually have kind of tanner skin and then more dark features, which makes sense for me because even though my family is mostly white, I'm only a quarter Mexican and then the rest is white. So most people, I think, with my heritage would be more pale. My brother is more pale, more like white than I am, but I'm very dark, and I almost think that maybe that's because of the Mercury influence, because it makes sense, Mercury being so close to the sun, that it would be almost kind of burnt or charred in a way. And it makes sense on a metaphorical level as well, because the sun, in ancient astrology, the sun represented like pure knowledge and wisdom. And when you're sitting in the sun or doing whatever in the sun, you not only get vitamin D, but you also get, it just energizes you. The ancients would say you get information, and it's a source of like intuition, that it activates your like mental, your cognitive abilities and stuff like that. And so, in modern astrology, we would usually think everything to do with information comes from Mercury, but really Mercury is just the translator, and I can relate to that as well. So like a lot of this information that I talk about, it doesn't come from me. It's stuff that I've absorbed elsewhere, have digested, and then am regurgitating or like reiterating, to you or to someone else, if that makes sense. So Mercury is sort of messenger god. The sun is like God itself, or energy, or consciousness, or information, love and light, I almost want to say. But then Mercury is like the translator of that. And so it is the one maybe teaching or giving that information. But it's just a translator. It's getting that information from somewhere else. It's not the source of information. But it's almost like that. I think light is information. I do very much want to gather information, and then just for my own curiosity. But then the thing is, once you get all this information, just from being curious and just wanting it all, what I've felt and what many people feel is that they want to pay it back in some way. And I think generally the best way to do that is just to teach it, to pass it on. I'm still relatively young in my life. I still have a lot to learn. I want to continue learning and growing. But at this time, this is something that I've sort of planned out over the years in astrology, that I knew that approaching my Saturn return, more of my mission would be beginning to be more about dispersing information and not just about collecting it. Going through my Saturn return in Aquarius, which has a lot to do with learning to be social and to be more communicative, learning to make myself more digestible, or more to do things in order to make my information more readily accessible for people and maybe attractive for people, or just learning all of that. I just think inevitably, as I approach and pass my Saturn return, more and more of my life mission will be about dispersing information rather than obtaining it. So that's kind of a lot to do with, what I'm doing with this channel. I'm not depressed, but it's like, at the end of a cycle, it's almost like nothing matters, and there's just this huge release, and that can be like inspiring or depressing. I just feel like it's fair to be as accurate as possible, to not only explain what I believe in as best I can, but also to explain a little bit about myself and where I'm coming from, just so that you know some context, I guess. I know things can be kind of tense or kind of weird with the moon in Capricorn as well, because the sun is exalted in Aries. It's squaring the moon, which is in detriment in Capricorn. Well, technically the moon is squaring the sun. So that'll be interesting as well once that third quarter moon comes exact as well. Both third quarter moon and Mercury at the last degree Pisces would both be making any last minute adjustments to something that's already been happening. They're both sort of philosophical positions. They're both in detriment. Mercury's in detriment in Pisces, and then the moon is detriment in Capricorn. So they're both sort of good for, and they're both wrapping up each of their cycles in a way. So they're both good for like taking a step back and being kind of detached and just like evaluating everything. They're both philosophical. They're both good for just like pondering things. I mean, depending on who you are and what your astrology is, that might sound awesome or it might sound like a nightmare. Let me know how it's going for you. Thanks for watching. I just don't expect this to get a lot of views, but I just figured it would be kind of different, and so maybe taking a risk here. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you later.